Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Damien. Hey, Bryan, chiming in after a long time to bring you one of my favorite medleys, and that is Valentine Card. Kantina, Were, Are, and Was, or Is by Unwound. This one is actually what I like to call an accidental medley because their pressing plant screwed up the tracklist order of the original press of this record. This botch turned out to be one hell of a success though, because to this day the band usually finishes their live shows with it. Have a good one. So I'm kind of intrigued by that. Usually track listing is something that's very particularly decided upon. And to hear that the pressing actually screwed it up, kind of a happy accident, is some neat little bit of trivia for this. The trilogy of songs, movements, is about 13 minutes long, so without further ado, let's dive into this and see what's going on, starting off with Valentine Card. Almost feels like my headphones are broken with this production style. Left side just, oh, what in the world? The left side is just consistently louder. It's a very rough production. Maybe I should say raw. It's a very rough performance though as well. The guitar frequently fluctuates in intonation. What a weird transition between movements. Just like the hum of an amp. This band really takes noise to the next level, not just through sheer layering, but through dissonance in harmony as well. This one feels a bit emo, which is interesting, smashing it up against the generally grungy feel we've had throughout. Like, what if Cap and Jazz merged with some old school Deftones? Really nice control over volume there. Just tension, discomfort. That is what every piece of this really aims for. I mean, we found a bit of peace here. Calm. But for how long? I think that's the big question. the level of dissonance and compression is exceptionally controlled, specific. It does a specific component to the music. We'll touch in later, but it helps the song be what it's being. I really think they're trying to go for gut wrenching right here. It's not quite working for me though. Well, that was a disaster. Appropriately, though, I think, is what they're aiming for. Oh, man. So, Valentine Card and Kantina do something a little bit different than were, are, and was, or is. And since we just listened to that, I want to talk about our instrumental outro first. I really get the gist that they were going for something exceptionally emotive. We had the calming, soothing guitar work that we had at the end of Kantina carry over into our final movement here, but I say calming and soothing, that doesn't really tell the whole story. It is the most calming part of the track, but there's a stress to it. There's a melancholy, there's a weight. It is very slow moving. It feels very dragging its feet. All the notes are sort of just interconnected. There aren't these nice stops between them. The tempo's a bit on the slower side. There really is no drive to move forward. It is calming because there's no noise, but that doesn't mean it's positive. We override this slowly but surely with noise. Just random chirps and strums of heavily distorted, overdriven guitar, sometimes two guitars, just making a ton of noise. Disgusting noise, I'd even say, and we'll touch on that in a second. It really comes through with the production, the choices that go into the guitar timbre. But it is discomfort that specifically is being injected into that. And I feel like even specifically towards the end, before we go into the feedback drone, is that it's supposed to be an overbearing weight that feels like it's going to break you. I don't quite think I connected with that. It was definitely uncomfortable, but I don't think it ever reached that point of extreme emotion that they were aiming for, though I'm sure that being a first time listener and maybe not knowing the rest of the album, I don't know how much of this is all interconnected. Um, Being that three tracks were put back to back on the pressing and they weren't supposed to be that way and they all run into each other, makes me think most of the songs bleed into each other and that there is more of a connectiveness to it. But yeah, I don't have any of the other context. I don't have the lyrics yet. It's very possible that on a subsequent listen, knowing more about what's going on, it may hit me a little harder. But mostly all I got was a want to be not here anywhere but listening to this. It is just very stressful noise on top of something that isn't even really positive. It is our rest point, but again, it's not a bright rest point. It's just a moment where we could breathe. And it's still stressed, but we could breathe a little. And just to weigh that over it and then shift to the feedback and the weight of the feed. I turned the volume down on my headphones in those last 40 seconds or so because it was just too much. And then it ends up panning from the right to the left, and it almost feels like it's getting sucked into a black hole off to the left, and it almost feels like it's trying to pull you into it too. Really interesting way to wrap this track up, to wrap up the whole trilogy of movements. It's a bit odd, I guess, to have started at the ending, but it was what was freshest in my mind, and I think it's important to know where we go. That there is a moment of a type of piece that is destroyed in a way that we hadn't seen prior. Knowing that that's where we go, I think adds impact to what Valentine Card and Kantina are doing, which is kind of the same, but on a much lesser level. Instead of taking a moment of peace and overlaying chaos on top of it, we frequently find ourselves in a very distressing type of chaos. The guitars are playing around more with texture than notes. Riffs are more about how they can create harsh sounds, whether that's through dissonance or dark harmony. Really going for a lot of tension within note intervals within a key. Um, we have aggressive vocal work that kind of borders on DSBM style of vocals. Um, Sorry. Leaning more into that depressive, uh, what's that word I want? When you have no other options. You guys know what I'm talking about. And that heightened emotional delivery. Desperation, that's the word. But it kind of still sticks into a type of post-hardcore, emo type of harsh as well. And it sort of straddles the line in an interesting way between a style I don't like and a style I do. And I never quite landed on where I sat with this specific vocal delivery. But it too added in all of this tension and distress to the song. It's a vocal style that feels like this person doesn't know what to do and is screaming, literally, for help. This is paired with the guitar work, and I mentioned we were going to come to this, and here we are. I mentioned how the production on the guitars amplifies something that the song is trying to put through, and it's particularly the overdrive. Overdrive is going to amplify certain aspects of music, and typically that's going to be tension and dissonance. It's perfect for this track that harmony, consonance, isn't really amplified. If you're playing a consonant chord, it's just going to be a louder consonant chord because of the overdrive. But if you play a dissonant chord, all of the grit and bite and static that comes through the overdrive is going to clash with the distortion, as the sound waves bouncing around each other that we hear in the dissonance. And it all amplifies each other in a way that the consonant harmonies don't get amplified. And so the sections that are consonant, that have a stable harmony that's palatable to most people's ears, is seemingly a bit quieter and or just not as powerful or as wide as the dissonant sections, which feel much larger comparatively. And so we have a song that they probably aren't strumming the guitars any differently between their consonant chords and their dissonant chords, but one certainly sounds more impactful or more prominent than the others. It is a song that no matter what you try to do, how you try to focus on things, the more troublesome, stressful components of the song are what are going to stand out most. It's what you can't help but focus on. And so while the song does shift between some of these more somber, quieter sections and fully distorted consonant chords, what stood out to me the most throughout the tracks were the heavily distorted, noisy sections. And so we have a trilogy of songs, or our first two, I should say, that feel like they're trying to balance everything. And by the time we get to the end of Kantina, our second track, we feel like we have found a peace. It isn't pleasant, but it is certainly better than the alternative. And we only get to find it for 2 minutes before it is slowly crept upon and ultimately destroyed. I don't know what the lyrics are about this, but the song overall feels like getting stomped on repeatedly. And any sort of leeway that you can make towards finding any better situation than continuously being stepped on by a giant is fleeting peace. It is moments of false hope. Any pushback you make is presented threefold in the opposite direction. And I think that's why the desperation in the vocals works well in this. I mentioned that it sort of feels like a cross up between a little bit of emo, classic emo, and Deftones, something noisier. And I still don't think I'm wrong about that. At least that's what it feels like to me. In fact, my Captain Jazz meets Deftones analogy that I made back at the beginning of the reaction, I still feel is accurate here at the end. And oddly enough, I think I want to listen to more of this, and I'm not quite sure why. On paper, it is not my cup of tea, but in execution, there's something about this track that you can't help but look away from. No, you can't help to look away from. What's the phrase I want? I have to stare at it. It's like a train wreck. You don't necessarily want to listen to it, but it just keeps calling your name. Hey, Bryan, I'm unwound. Come check me out. So that's where I'm sitting on this one. It's a thing. I'm gonna hit some lyrics, see what's going on there, and we'll wrap this one up. So, Valentine Card is about unrequited love. Our protagonist uh, is deeply in love with somebody for a very long time, it seems, and it's possible that they've talked with this other person about it, and they know that it'll never happen. This other person just isn't interested in them that way. At one point says, what is it? Oh, I know that I can't take her anywhere. Um, but at the beginning, there seems to be a familiarity to it. It says, I know you see the stars in my eyes. My heart means the world to me, and I can't seem to break it apart. So they have this strong feelings toward this other person. This other person doesn't reciprocate it back. They just want to be friends, kind of idea. And our protagonist just can't go on with that, and this constant battle in order to not lose the friendship, but feeling consistently unfulfilled for quite some time. It says, I know it seems so long ago to be stuck on a face that won't go away. There's the idea that they've written a letter. He says, rolled ink, don't think I would ever send it to you though. Valentine, will you always be mine? He's got a letter, and he refuses to send it for whatever reason. And that's the entire song. It's this schism between keeping what you have and wanting more out of life. And I think that schism shows through both in the desperation of the vocals, specifically about being stuck in this specific situation, but also in the music, jumping back and forth between the not so pleasant lulls. They're not a great situation, but it's a lot better than the anxiety and noise of the louder sections. And that is the feeling of, just continuing on with this friendship. It's not the best situation, but it's better than completely losing this person out of his life. And the rest of the music, the gritty, heavy, gnarly stuff, is this deep desire to be with this person. From there, we move on to Kantina, which is a song all about finding the hope, the ability maybe to be alone. Resignation in possibly the previous topic song, although again they weren't necessarily written with that in mind, but the two do go hand in hand, so I'm going to read into it that way, even if it is an accident. A resignation that you can't go on living your life like that, stuck in the middle that way. So instead, just resigning to be alone, losing the friendship altogether, but also desperately wanting attention, a social aspect to your life. It says resignation to sit behind the others. Smile. It's not so bad to be the only one. Wait, don't go. Stay, please. Until I find another one at least. Well, the sunrise was a lie. It was a dream. It's too dark outside to be alive. Wanting so desperately to be a part of social circles, but knowing that they just don't have that capacity for whatever reason. And like I said, it works so well coming off of Valentine Card too. This idea of saying, well, I guess I'll just be alone then. That is the entire song. And so if we take this as a trilogy, once again, unintentional, but it is how it ended up being, we have a track that falls back into that lull. If alone is what I'm going to be, then I guess that's my default state. It's not great, but it's better than constant heartbreak. But you can't just be alone forever. That's not something you can just deal with. We are social creatures. We need more than that. And that is where a lot of the noise and darkness and dissonance comes from at the end of were, are, and was, or is. It is the idea that if I'm resigning to this life of loneliness, that it will eat me alive. And it all comes together in such a beautifully depressive way. It certainly is a happy accident. I think these three songs go very well together and tell a concise story that otherwise it sounds like they weren't going to have. You would have had to read into the album and read these three tracks together, even though they weren't played back to back. I find it even wilder that they move into each other this way. Again, maybe the whole album does, but it sounds like at the end of were, are, and was or is, we've reached a conclusion. There's an ending there. Doesn't feel like it goes into the next track. So those are my thoughts on Unwound's Valentine Card, Kantina, were, are, and was or is. Let me know what yours are down in the comment section. Give me your perspectives, thoughts, opinions, anything else about this track. Let me know if you enjoyed it or not. Whatever you want to type, just put it all down there. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. I don't know, I was going to say 6. That's not how time zones work. 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.